Hi, everyone, and welcome to my interview with one of the finalists on Australian Survivor Australia vs. the World. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Janine, someone who I am very excited to talk to. If you can go ahead and like this video, subscribe, maybe even leave us a comment with your favorite Janine moment this season. That would be a lot of fun. I hope that you enjoyed this season as much as I did, and I hope that you enjoy my chat with Janine. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to the Survivor Now podcast.
I was busy on the beach, like I was on Survivor.
I don't believe anything you say on Survivor.
I almost called it.
It's now time.
I'm so excited.
Oh no!
I do love you, but
Oh, it's so wrong.
I gotta go. I got something to do. Not as exciting as this. I'll tell you that right now, but.
All right, Janine, I sort of feel like this final three is like my perfect fan fiction sort of ending, because I told Parvati about this, but her seasons are what really got me into the game of US Survivor. But Champions vs. Contenders 2 was the first season of Australian Survivor that I ever watched. And very quickly, it was during lockdown, my family and I became instant fans of yours, to the point where I even bought my mom your book, The Accidental Entrepreneur, for her birthday. So we learned a lot from watching you play. How did it feel being back?
Oh, look, look, they were kind enough to ask me a number of times for other seasons, but this one being Australia v. the World, and also being only 14 days, because as you know, Australia loves to do it for a long time. It's like 50 days.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first season I did, I was standing there with Pierre going, do you know if we're in America, we'd be done by now? Like, oh my God. So, and I remember also saying to her, if I ever say I'm going to do this again, you've got to slap me really hard, right? So yeah, no, but I mean, I love the game, like you know, it's a real, like, I love to challenge myself. I love to have adventures. I love to have spikes. So, you know, it was a real privilege to play the second time.
I was so happy to hear when you were announced on this season. Your game, it got me to think about the game differently when I first saw you play. And I loved especially how you spoke about viewing your potential risks as percentages, right? Like, what was the best percentage of getting me farther in the game versus what was not going to do that? And I'm just wondering, out of all of the game moves that you made this time, which one do you think had the highest percentage of getting you closer to the end?
Probably my relationships with Luke and my relationships with Parv and Suri. They're the three things as a percentage. Now, look, when we say percentages, you can be unlucky in Survivor. Like Suri, you know, I remember one season she had nothing going on and she was just like left, right? So you can be unlucky. But so it actually does get down to my odds of getting through is this path. And I very much have a clear view of how I get to the end. And I think there was a point in the game that Luke and I went, we have to divide and conquer, right? We're in the minority, got to work it out. And we had to push on doors. And so he was pushing on the international doors and I was pushing on the Suri and the American doors. And, you know, for me, means Suri is just this beautiful, spirited, wonderful woman. And we connected straight off, right? I think maybe because we're both grandparents or whatever it is, but we sort of did go. And I think also we're too old to deal with bullshit. And so for her and I, we just kind of connected in a really beautiful way. And so I felt like that, and Parvati also, Parvati and I got along really well too. So they didn't show that, which was fine because I have to do the story arc or whatever. But we definitely were a lot tighter than what the TV sort of showed. So for me, that was probably where I got my percentage. I went, okay, this is my path to the end. Hence why that crazy tribal council, when I found out at the last minute that Parvati was going to be on the chopping block, I then went, I have to stop this and I have to let her know and I had to blow it up. And so that was probably the first time I was a bit more overt in my game, because as you know, my game's a bit more, let me find out what's best interest for you and let me tell you what's best interest for you and convince you that that's the way we go. So I'm very much that player. So no one can go, Janine's saying this and Janine's saying that. So I'm very subtle in my approach.
Subtle and very specific. And you mentioned your relationship with Suri, and that I love seeing that connection as well, especially It was very clear that you two had a great relationship. I love seeing that interaction, especially when your goal was to get Suri to question Kirby's loyalty, which ultimately ended up in blindsiding Kirby. Now, I because this came back around at the end of the show when you were at Final Tribal Council, do you think it was fair for Sarah to say that this was a flaw in what you consider to be a flawless game?
Oh, look, Sarah, I think was because obviously, as you know, in the villa, people get to talk and it's not like they're in isolation, they get to talk. So it came pretty clear to me that Kirby must have said to her that I was part of that vote. And even though I was part of her questioning Sarah going forward, because I wanted Kirby into my group, I thought Kirby was my group, but I didn't realize I wasn't part of Kirby's group, which then as soon as I realized that, I made steps to rectify that. But at that time, I thought Kirby was with me. So I didn't realize that she wasn't. So that's why I went, okay, with my people, I will make sure they're very aware of it. And so if I'm with Kirby, which because of Luke and my relationship with Luke and stuff, we were with Kirby, then unfortunately Sarah, who I actually really liked and wanted to play with, suddenly was not part of the group. So I found out very clearly with that question when Sarah turned to Kirby and went, "Did Janine not know?" I went, okay, Kirby, you're being a bit cheeky there and telling her a bit of a porky pie, I think. And then I immediately went, oh, I've lost that vote, bugger. But and so that I thought that was a really interesting, but then equally, which they did cut out, I said to Kirby, I said, you're a better player than being manipulated by me into making a decision. So, and also think that with this game, you can actually target someone, but it's about timing. Timing is critical. Just because someone says someone's after you, it doesn't mean you've got to shoot them. You've got to pick the right timing to get to the end. And I think that that timing was very interesting for getting rid of Sarah.
Because they were saying, and I believe that their argument was that it was so close to merge happening that by planting the idea of Sarah going after Kirby into Kirby, like that was ultimately going to lead to the downfall of the Australians. And then we saw Luke's reaction at that final tribal council sort of, it seemed like he sort of doubled down on the surprise and shock, but wasn't he a part of
No, he was taking the piss. He was just mucking around. He was going, yeah, it was you, because we clearly knew what went on. And so no, he was just playing. And sort of, yeah. So no, that was just funny. That was just Luke being funny. But no, it was very perplexing. But so clearly, Kirby was planting some seeds there that were but we're challenging, because at the end of the day, Kirby did not have to make that move. In actual fact, we as an Australians were doing completely different moves somewhere else. So that was a big surprise for me. So I don't know how I end up getting lumped with it, but but that's the game.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that Luke wasn't just throwing you under the bus just for the sake of his game. I mean, it was. It was.
And he was good on him.
Honestly, I mean, yeah, all of you played such amazing games, but I love seeing the relationship between you, Luke, and at the time, at the start of the game, David. And you have this great quote where you said, and it was at Final Tribal Council, I see Survivor as a game of loyalty and trust. You just have to pick the right people. Now, you, Luke, and David, it had ups and downs on your seasons. You were, responsible for David's blind side, and then Luke was responsible for you. So how did you kind of go about assessing if this was going to work out this time?
Look, I think fundamentally we understood each other, right? And I think if it's in our best interest to stay together, which it was, then it would work. I think in actual fact, I'm probably a closer friend to David, but if in the game, I would trust Luke over David, if that makes sense.
Yeah, why is that?
I just think because, I don't know, I think Luke's got this I think David would go for the game, which is probably the right way to go. I think Luke would always go, my heart sort of says I shouldn't. So I think that, not that, hey, not that David may never have turned on me, and I probably never would have turned on David, um, but yeah, I think we were a very good three, and we end up being a very good three the first time around too. And I think because we are so different, and all three of us came to the team with different skills. I mean, Luke can squirrel into people, and like and that's what, and I think that that's what works well in Survivor when you have different skills, because then it amplifies what you can achieve.
Did you at all feel any betrayal from Luke when he revealed his idol at one of those last couple of tribal councils?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think I actually, if I had an idol, I wouldn't have told him either. I think that, unless I would have, the only reason I would have told Luke if I had an idol is if there was a purpose for it. Okay, Luke, I've got an idol. This is my play, right? But just to tell me for telling me for sake, I never at any point would have I expect him to tell me. However, what was cut out, I did have a conversation with him because he's a terrible liar, Luke, terrible liar. And I said to him, I said, okay, have you got an idol? And he went, no, no, no. And I went, oh my God, you have. And he said, no, I haven't. I said, it's all good. We just accept that you've got it and let's move on. And I kept moving, kept walking, but that was cut out. So, so in my heart, I knew he'd never told me, but I knew he did because he's a shocking liar. And that's because he's sweet and kind.
It did kind of seem like it didn't catch you quite by surprise at tribal council, but he did throw a nice looking necklace on you as well, so you were immune.
He did. Mind you, I never, at that point, I didn't, because of my relationship with Parv and Suri, I didn't feel vulnerable, but it was still very nice to have it, because the time that you don't feel vulnerable in Survivor is the time you go home. So.
No, very true. And my final question I just wanted to ask you was about that final four that you had with Luke, Suri, and Parvati. You've been talking about it throughout our whole time together. At what point specifically did this final four form? Like, what was the exact point? Because we always see alliances form here, they form there, the voting blocks are here, and we just never know what is the real one that's going to make it to the end.
Yeah, I think the final four, I mean, obviously, in actual fact, Suri and Parvati might have a different answer to this, but in my world, the final four happened just before that crazy tribal. So I felt like we were becoming a four just before then. And so that's when I felt it was formed. I don't know what they would say. They might say it as after it. I'm not sure, because I don't know what their relationships were with the world, because they had it a lot longer than I did. But I was feeling like we were becoming a really solid four at that point.
So going into that crazy tribal, you felt safe.
Not necessarily safe. I don't think you ever go into a tribal safe, but I felt like that our relationships were developing to a point where that, and as you know, with Parvati, I was playing seeds with regard to, Cass wants you out, right? And that was obvious, because they were the two real challenge beasts. So they needed to get each other out at some point. And Cass, I couldn't feel like I could break through that one, but I could with Parvati. And so that was another little seed I went, just so you know. So I think that she was already starting to feel like they're coming for me. And so with that sort of, and as you know, Survivor's all about paranoia. And because of that paranoia, I was feeding that paranoia. So I was feeling like we were getting a lot of traction. And that's where that final four was feeling like a final four.
Well, Janine, I just wanted to thank you so much for spending this time with me. I thought you played a really excellent game. And
thank you.
Of course, thank you so much, Janine. I hope you well.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye.